Today, we are cracking open one of the most misunderstood parts of music production: loudness. Why do some tracks sound loud and others sound flat, but the meters look the same? Today, I am revealing the real science behind loudness. How can you make your mixes hit harder, cleaner, and smarter? At the end of this video, I'm going to be walking you through my free Ableton loudness mastering chain, which you stick on the end of your project so that you can master your own music using Ableton stock plugins only. Stick it on the end of your project to get your mixes sounding loud on export. And if you don't want to wait until the end of the video, just download it below in the description. Mastering loudness. Secrets every producer needs to know. Right, let's get into section 1. Yeah. What is loudness? Okay, let's get one thing straight. Loudness is perception. It's not just numbers. It's not about peak volume. It's about how your ears perceive energy over time. And that's why LUFS and RMS matter more than hitting 0 dB. Okay, so peak versus RMS versus LUFS. If I'm speaking a foreign language to you right now, let me explain. Peak is the maximum peak value on your output meter, and you may have heard that when sending your tracks off to master, you want to be aiming for a maximum peak value of -6, -8, so that the mastering engineer can make your tune ready for streaming and download. So when you send your mix off to the mastering engineer, -6 dB is the peak volume, and the peak reading is the highest point at which your track peaks on the meter. So on your main output here, this value, if you click this box, it will reset it. But if we play this track, so the peak value there is actually -0.51, which is far too loud for the -6 dB. So you want to be taking this down -8 on this track. So it's relative. So let's take it to -6. And that would be your peak value of -6.16. And so when you're sending your track off to be mastered, you want to be aiming for around -6 dB maximum of peak value. Now, when we're referring to perceived loudness, peak value can go in the bin. You want to be focusing mainly on RMS and LUFS. Firstly, the RMS value, which is root mean squared. Root mean squared is the average amount of peak value over time. So it's all of these peaks and troughs and downs and ups, and then it gives you the average value instead of the peak value. And that will give you an overall perceived loudness because ears are sensitive to loudness and energy over time. So the brain might hear this as quiet because it's happened over a short period of time, but it might hear this as louder because it is more sound collectively over time. Now, LUFS is what music producers get down and dirty to, because LUFS is the standard unit that we all love to get excited about. Loudness units relative to full scale. Nice one. It's a standardized way of measuring perceived loudness in music and audio production. It tells you how loud your track is perceived to be based on the human ear, not just the peak values in your software or hardware. So the human ear is built to perceive different frequencies and be sensitive to different frequencies across the frequency spectrum at varying dynamics. The middle range is where we hear the most. So naturally, if you want your track to be loud, you want to be focusing on that area. LUFS is really important because this is how streaming software measures audio. So obviously, Spotify, for example, wants all of their tunes to be coming out at the same LUF level because they don't want the listener to be having an uncomfortable experience listening to a tune and then all of a sudden another one comes in at 10 times the volume. So consistency is one of the reasons why LUFS is important, because it helps keep your track sounding loud amongst the others on the platform. And platforms like Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, they normalize their music to -14 LUFS. So if your music is louder than this, they will squash it down and make it quieter. You want to be aiming to tailor it to -14 LUFS, and I'm sure you can search the worldwide internet to find the LUF values for all the other platforms as well. Another reason why measuring LUFS is really important is avoiding over compression. So compressing and limiting your audio, in essence, makes it bigger and louder, but if you over compress, you could be going in the opposite direction. So by measuring your LUFS, you can avoid over compression, destroying your dynamic range and ensuring that your tracks stay loud. Now, Ulean Loudness Meter 2 is a great free piece of software that you can use to measure your LUFS. Okay, on here, we're not going to go through all of it, but the main thing you want to be looking at is integrated. Integrated is the overall loudness of your track. That's the one that most platforms care about. Then above is the short term, and short term is the measurement of the recent LUF level over a short period as your track is playing along. So if you go into a breakdown, you can measure your LUF level in that short-term breakdown period. Okay, so let's have a look at these two tracks that we have here. So let's do the top one first. Okay, so the value there, -11 LUFS integrated, so that is actually louder than streaming platforms, so that will be squashed down to -14, and the short-term LUFS is actually -8.4. Let's check the track underneath. Okay, so that tune is quite all over the place in terms of LUFS, so that will be normalized. But it is kind of balancing around -14, but you can see the short term there is -9.4. So these are loud tracks, but they will be reduced down for streaming software. At the bottom here, you have True Peak Max, which is the peak meter reading, which if you want to be sending this off to a mastering engineer, you want to be getting it down to that -6. So it's up to you what you use to measure your audio. Personally, I like to use the peak meter for sending off to a mastering engineer, and then also LUFS because the human ear perceives loudness more than RMS, which is just an average peak value over time. We are making music for a listener, so we want to be making it loud or perceived to be loud for them. Section 2, loudness equals energy density. Loud mixes are dense, but not distorted. That means filling up the space with lots of instruments, highs, mids, and lows, but ensuring that they all work together instead of crowding and congesting each other. So I'm just going to play the bass and the drums, and we're going to take a look at the LUFS with just these two instruments or just these two stems. We're on -20 LUFS. The tracks are turned down, but now we are going to add in the instruments and the melody, and we're going to play the same section again. Okay, so we've gone up 2 LUFS by adding extra instruments, and obviously if it was more instrumentation over time, as you can see here, we've got a lot of silence, but if we had more instrumentation in here and it was energy over time, which is what the human ear perceives as loudness, then we're going to get higher levels on our LUFS meter. Let's get another channel favorite, and definitely something else that's free that you should download, which is Span. If we take a look at the same thing again with the drums and the bass by themselves, and then add in the harmonic content on top, you'll see how this picture just fills out, especially in the mid-range, which if you want to add loudness to your mix, focus on the mid-range, as that's where the human ear perceives loudness the most. Focus on the mid-range energy and punchy transients, and that way you will get your track loud on phones, cars, and in the clubs. Section 3, headroom and gain staging. So you may have heard of gain staging. It's what you do in order to prepare your mix to send it to be mastered, and headroom is the amount of room, of silence basically, on top of your mix below 0 dB. And here's the secret: your master and the loudness of it starts at the mix level. If you want a loud master, you need to have a balanced mix. Aim for -6 to -8 on your peak level on your output meter and some good RMS LUF values. But obviously, if you're aiming for -6 to -8 as a peak on your output meter, well then the corresponding LUF value is going to be at -6 to -8, which isn't the loudness at 0 dB. So I have created an Ableton rack using Ableton stock plugins that will allow you to produce your track to that -6 level, monitor your LUFs, and then either send it off to be mastered or master it yourself. First, let's just turn off the rack and let's have a look at the peak value on the master. Okay, so we're at -7. Now on this rack, if you turn it on, the thing that we're going to focus on first, let's just collapse everything else, is utility. So utility, if you enable this by just turning it up by 1, it will turn it on. It's set to +6. By having this turned on and at +6, you can now monitor your 0 dB hypothetical endpoint scenario by pressing play on the track. Okay, so we're at -1-ish, so we can probably go up a little bit on our volume sliders. Cool, so around there, -0.47. Back into Ableton Loudness Mastering Chain free download that you can download in the description as well as access all of my courses. By having the rack turned on, we are now hypothetically at 0 dB. You do all of your production with this on the end chain on your main here. I've got it on the group, but you would stick this on the main on the output master, and you'd work producing your track. Keep monitoring here with your peak level. You want to be hitting 0 dB. If you go above that, you are entering into distortion. So you want to be turning down your tracks, doing gain staging, which is balancing your volumes so that you end up with a 0 dB level. And then when it's time to either send your track off to master, you just turn off the utility and then you press play. And your track is at -6 to -8 dB. Say you've just reached the point where you're about to disable this utility and send it to master. If you press play and monitor your LUFs, you can see there we're at around -12, and if you disable the utility, we're at -18. So that gives you an indication as to where the mastering engineer may take the volume of your track, and it gives you proper headroom. Proper headroom gives the mastering engineer something to work with rather than fight against. And you can see with the LUF levels that we are pretty much aiming for that -14 LUF, which is compatible with streaming software, because the last thing you want is the streaming software to be normalizing your mix quieter. Before we go into the rest of the rack, I want to explain a few more things to you, and then the rest of the rack will make sense. Section 4 is compression and saturation, as well as hitting subscribe, like, and dropping a comment below. Thank you. Loudness relative to harmonic content. So we use compression to control dynamic range, and we use saturation to introduce harmonics. Humans naturally hear harmonic-rich, dense content louder than pure tones. Here we have Serum with a sine wave on oscillator 1. So this is a pure sine wave because there's no harmonics in here. So we're hearing a pure tone. This is a pure tone without any harmonics, any character, any other frequency bumps along the frequency spectrum that show volume at these particular frequencies. By enabling the saturator, we now have harmonic rich content. By adding extra harmonics into the picture, it increases the perception of loudness. And in essence, it is louder because there's now volume at other frequencies, but really we're dealing with the same instrument that hasn't been turned up or down at all. And then we add a compressor to control the dynamic range. Enable, bring down the threshold, and increase the output with the makeup gain. And if we have a Ulean loudness meter, in order to show that this is actually now perceived to be louder, we use the Ulean loudness meter. Minus 15 LUFS with the saturator and the compressor. Minus 12 LUFS. And obviously it's all about balance. You can adjust your settings, your drive, your output, your threshold, and your makeup gain on your saturator and your compressor. But the key really is balance. Don't overdo it or your mix will feel crushed. You want to be carefully monitoring so that it feels polished and loud. Section 5, limiting like a pro. The final gatekeeper is the limiter. This is what pushes your mix to the final stage of loudness. But do not abuse it, because it's gnarly if it's abused. Ableton has a limiter. You need to be very careful with it. I personally put limiters on my groups, not all the time, but usually just on the groups, very minimally. And then if I'm mastering my own tunes, again, minimally on the mastering chain. You don't want to be brick walling your limiter unless you're doing it for sound design purposes, because your track is just going to sound crushed and you're going to lose your dynamic range and it's just a bit over the top. Or OTT. So we have Ableton's limiter here, -1 on the ceiling so that we have some control, and you can increase your input gain. I would set the release to auto, increase the input gain. This is not a scenario where you would use this limiter, it's just for demonstration purposes only. Ulean loudness meter to monitor the difference. So if we play the track without, minus 12 LUFS. And if we now activate the limiter and increase the input gain, you can see that limiter is working really hard, but we're now at minus 8.5 LUFS, but at the expense of some probably destroyed dynamics. Balance, monitor, be careful, do not overdo with limiters, and definitely find the loudest point of your track to set your limiter settings. Okay, so let's walk you through the rest of this rack, which is available for download for free if you want to click download. Also, check out my courses. They are down there in the description as well as links to all of my socials. But here we are again on the Ableton loudness mastering chain. We've already taken a look at utility and how you can use that to get to your 0 dB level without distorting, and then disabling that to send your track off to be mastered. And the rest of these settings here, if we open up one by one, we have the auto filter. I've used the auto filter instead of an EQ8 because it gives you a 24 slope. So if you activate that, we now have the 24 high pass filter at 30 Hertz. And that just in essence cleans up your low end. The low end that the listener can't hear, but it might be overpowering and congesting your track. So a sub cleanup, which is literally a binary switch. It turns that on and off. Then we've got the EQ8. There's two settings here. There's a reducing the muddiness area of your mix and also adding some air, which is a high shelf on the higher frequencies. Go easy on that because it can get very airy. Gain reduction, which is on the glue compressor. So we've talked about how compression of your dynamics can increase loudness. So the gain reduction turns on the compressor, and then you also have the option for makeup gain here as well, so that you can reintroduce some volume into those dynamics that you've squashed down. And then we have the saturator, which we've spoken about how introducing harmonics can help with perceived loudness. So by saturating your overall mix, we've got some gentle saturation here on the drive. We don't want to be overdoing this. If you feel like this is too much, pull back on the drive wet. We are looking for very minimal touches here. We don't want to be overdoing it on the mastering chain. And then finally, we have the limiter on-off switch, and then also the limiter input gain. The ceiling is set at -1 and it's also set at auto, and that's the final point of your mastering chain. So we're going to use the stems from this track. They are at -11. We can disable the utility and let's go through each stage so that we can get this sounding louder. Let's look at the LUFS value first before we do anything with the rack. Okay, so we're on -18 LUFS. Now let's go through one by one, cleaning up this mix, adding in harmonics, and compressing and limiting. So now we've carefully set our settings in the rack for the mastering chain. We're going to play this track before, which shows -18 LUFS, and then we're looking for -14 integrated so that we are compliant with streaming software. Enable the rack. We're around -14 LUFS on the integrated. Obviously, you can spend a lot more time doing that. I'm not going to do that on this video, but that is your free mastering chain. If you'd like to master your own tracks, that is available for you to download in the description. If this helped level up your mastering skills, then please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and comment below to let me know what you learnt, what you liked, and what you'd like to see more of in the future. I do have links to my courses and my socials below, so please check them out. My name is Becky Safe, and I will see you for another video. Bye. 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 See you later. Bye.